they want to assert that the laws of physics can be broken, which is what most people would consider to be a miracle.
Yeah, well, they appear to not be able to be broken now, but
it's not.
If God did it, it wouldn't matter, right?
I'm in the middle of talking. It's not based on any evidence whatsoever. To assert that the speed of light could have been different in the past is just an empty assertion with nothing backing it up. It's not.
How do you know that?
It's not been able to change because what evidence do you have? It's just an empty assertion. What backs it up?
You've got 50 years of
expansion.
Tests.
What's that?
Expansion.
Yeah, God made it look like that.
Expansion. The expansion.
What do you mean God made it look like that?
Well, no, expansion actually can go faster than light, but we're talking about the speed of light.
Yeah, the speed of light is maintained.
Yeah, currently it is.
And it's really what we're talking about is the speed of light. The speed of light in a vacuum, because the speed of light changes.
I'm agreeing with you. By the way, it's, the expansion of the universe doesn't affect the speed of light. It's just being stretched further and further, and mathematics has to adjust to that continuously. You know, the Andromeda is getting closer to us, to our galaxy, etc. So it's like the speed of light doesn't. It doesn't change. It's a full law, essentially.
So God is omni everything, and with that being said, as a human, we have uncovered the ability to develop what we think will be a warp bubble. And that's just us humans doing that. God already knows how to do that. He's known how to do that since the beginning of time. So when he was putting the universe together, I mean, it's very possible that he was using like warp bubbles to move the light around, because he's probably operating outside in, right? If you think about it, that's probably the only way he's going to do that, right? So somehow he's on the outside of the universe. He's operating outside in. I mean, it's very possible that he used warp bubbles to get everything to where it needs to be to look like that, right? I mean, that's not that big of an ask.
So I know you're just playing devil's advocate or God's advocate in this case, but to assert what a fictional character did, you would have to first explain how the fictional character exists in the first place without special pleading.
Yeah, necessity.
And how has it actually come to exist, though? You're going to just say always existed?
Yeah, he's always existed. There's no possible world in which he couldn't exist, because he has to exist. He's the first cause. He's the ultimate.
And do you see how that would be considered special pleading?
Well, it's out of necessity, right? Because there's no possible world in which he could not exist.
It's what he's appealing to, strong atheists, is basically like there's a logical necessity. I mean, I'm sure that you're fully aware of this. Instead of contingency.
I understand what he's saying completely,
but that is based on physicality.
So in any case, it's still an empty assertion that you would need a supreme being with intelligence to consciously create the universe with intention behind it. It's
by logic.
It's not realistic. The same thing that you give the properties of God to. I know when you're just playing God's advocate here, but I would say energy / matter. That's what always existed. Can't be created or destroyed. But I base that on the first law of thermodynamics, and we know that energy / matter exists. We don't know that about God.
Well, I mean, we don't know.
But we don't know if we don't know.
Created, right? Like, do you know what the conditions were like prior to this instance of?
We don't know if a universe or an isolated or closed system existed before that. So that's where the thermodynamics.
So science.
I mean, this definitely appears to be an isolated system that the laws of thermodynamics apply to. You're definitely correct there. But what were the conditions prior? How do you know that a God didn't kick-start it and is operating in and around the universe? He's omni-everything. What would stop him from doing that? Where's the contradiction?
Taco, no one knows that.
Science.
No one knows what you're asking.
Science
it's been revealed to us through personal and special revelation.
Science can get us back to Planck length time after the expansion of the Big Bang started. If you want to put your God of the gaps argument, that's where it would go before the Big Bang. However, anything that's ever been asserted to be God has always been proven to be natural, and therefore most likely whatever came was natural. And I would also assert non-conscious to add consciousness in there is harder to explain than the actual universe itself.
Well, life can only come from life, and life exists here now. So we know that something lifelike, whether that just be a conscious mind or whether that be a supreme being or whatever the case may be, created everything.
Do you believe in the Big Bang?
We're here today.
Do you believe?
I already mentioned necessity. None of what you're saying matters.
Do you believe in the Big Bang?
I mean, that's definitely appears to be what science shows. I mean, God definitely made it look that way, right?
Do you think that life existed at that time?
The Big Bang? I mean, the God has always existed, right? I mean,
do you think that
necessarily always existed?
Do you think that life existed at that time?
If you want to consider the God life, sure. It just depends on your definition of life, right? I mean, it's a conscious mind that operates the universe. I don't know what more you want from that.
But what he's asking
just a second, Sean. Let them get to the natural conclusion of their conversation, please. Hold on, just 1 second, man. We'll let you have your say, but let's let Strong and Taco get to a natural conclusion.
What I would like is a source for this being that you're asserting. First of all, I don't know that you would call it life when it's considered to be outside of time and space.
Yeah, it's been revealed to us in the Bible. You've probably heard of it. The Bible, Bible.
Yeah, the Bible is the claim.
Well, no, it's not. It's a book that has been revealed to us through special revelation and been verified through personal revelation.
Right. The Bible.
Are you discounting my personal experiences?
Right. So the Bible is true because the Bible is true.
Are you saying I'm a liar?
Are you saying the Bible is true because the Bible is true?
The Bible is true because it's been revealed to us by God.
And how do you know that?
Through personal revelation.
And what exactly was that?
I had a religious experience, and it was revealed to me.
And what was that actual experience like?
It was a good one.
And did God communicate with you verbally, visually, both?
Dude, I'm playing devil's advocate. I know that, but it was personally revealed to me.
All right, I'm just playing along with you. I know. I understand. I think we've reached our conclusion. Go ahead, Shawniosis, if you want to add something to our fictional conversation. Mostly fictional on Taco's part.
Taco, question for you. Really important. What kind of taco are you?
Breakfast taco.
What was that, Al?
Chorizo, eggs, cheese, and probably some type of hot sauce.
That sounds really fucking good.
The hot sauce sounds lovely. I just don't get the part there's like a break in. I mean, your full force taco, by the way, I'm speaking to, is that you have that sort of full force belief, but when you're questioned in that regard of right, how do you know, or where do you stand, it breaks down.
You know he's just around,
strong
right?
Atheist. Yeah, strong atheist has made.
How is it breaking down? It's been personally revealed to me. There's nothing breaking down. I know this is true.
But you can't explain how it's personally revealed to you. Literally, I waited.
He's kidding. He's joking around.
Everyone did.
He wasn't really being serious. He was just we have no theists here, and he's.
Oh yeah, I'm an atheist. I'm playing a devil's advocate. So when he's asking about, I haven't had a personal revelation, so I was just making stuff up.
Hey Taco, can I attack? Can I actually go after the personal revelation ideology real quick?
Okay.
So I actually had my own personal revelations multiple times. I was a Pentecostal Christian for 20 years. You want to know what the difference is? I found out later that it was all PTSD related, or I was manipulated to believing that it was a thing when it actually wasn't. It was just hypnosis, clever lies, and plants.
Oh.
So how do you know that it isn't just that you're going through a PTSD hallucination, or if you weren't mind controlled and brainwashed into believing something that is not true?
That's a good point.
I know it's a good point because I'm an expert in this stuff.
That's the best point anybody made.
I wanted to ask a question.
Although
also,
they're never going to be like, that's a strong argument, but that's a strong argument, and it hits them, and it's going to cause cognitive dissonance. That's a good one.
Trust me, I know. I was in a cult for 20 years.
So, Taco, I wanted to ask you a question also, if I could, please.
Yep, sure.
So Taco, in the role that you were playing, what were your presuppositions? Because you started talking about a God and revelation, personal revelations and things before we ever established that there was an actual God that existed.
Also, which God were we talking about?
Right.
It's that there's a
conscious
mind that exists somehow outside of, around, is everything that is, was, and ever will be, knows everything that has ever and will happen, is the creator of all, and is the logical, necessary starting and finishing point.
So can I also tackle that real quick? I'm about to make your life even harder. So if an all-knowing God has the power of all knowledge and wants to deliver a message to humanity, what would the best way to deliver said message be?
Through the Bible.
So it would be literal, correct? A literal communication.
Not necessarily. It depends on if the God is deceitful or not.
Why would a God that is all-knowing, that wants to deliver a very important message about your eternity, be any less blunt than literal?
Because it's deceitful.
Okay, then why should you worship a deceitful God?
Absolutely not.
Hey, can
I know, but that's another really good point, isn't it?
But they won't ever say it's deceitful.
Oh, of course. But, like, I do make a really good point.
Can I help Taco out real quick?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So what is ultimate that grounds all possibility and impossibility?
JMU double D.
I had to do it. I'm sorry. I had to do it.
Ooh. Wait, Frank, did you know there's no such thing as perfection? Like, it's not even a concept. 1 second, be right back.
Okay.
State your question again, Frank.
So I copied Darth's argument, and then so I decided to run Darth's argument, and I tested it on a bunch of people, and it worked really well. And then I feel like it's stronger if you veer away from Darth, because he pulls all this logical stuff and ignores a bunch of the science. But I feel like you have to it needs some work. But Darth's argument is a lot better if you're more personable. But he's like a master controller, I think it's called. Right? Like, he has to be in control of the debate.
Well, all I know is that he says something like, what do all facts depend upon? What's the context of all facts? And then do all facts depend upon God? And if they don't, then that means you automatically don't believe in God. So you would have to defend the not God position at that point. And then, yeah.
I think he's lost in the sauce, right? And what I mean by that, I should explain that better. So he spends a lot of time reading these theological philosophy books, and they're like pseudo philosophy all the way through. The guy that I forget his name, but the guy that he bases his builds his argument around redefined almost like every term that he uses, right? And so when you're having a conversation with someone like Darth, it's all composition division fallacy, right? So they swap between like logical or necessary and contingent consistently, and because contingent would basically mean that it like relies on reality in many circumstances, but there's also other uses of contingent. And then necessary, there's a couple ways to use necessary. So you're if you're not sharp, they're just going to swap definitions on you non-stop until you give up. And it's just changing definitions until they pin you in a corner. And you're not sharp enough to catch them changing these definitions over and over and over and over. And you're going to lose a debate and get pinned in a corner, and you're going to give up.
Right.
Hang on, there's two different definitions for necessary.
There's a lot to these conversations, actually. This guy pinpointed it better than I can ever explain it. I sent you a video. I'm going to watch it 20 more times until I can repeat this verbatim, because this guy's absurdly smart.
Where'd you put it?
Right. So I'm going to believe that this guy's...
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you what I actually believe. And I've been thinking about this for a while, but I'm starting to kind of believe kind of like Darth Arianis, where I believe like consciousness could be fundamental as well, not just material, not just the physical world, but yeah, maybe I don't know. Shawnee might agree with me, but that's where I'm coming
from. Like orchestrated objective reduction by Sir Roger Penrose, or
well, how do you avoid infinite regression if there's not a logical sort of choice to impose anything into existence?
Frank, I actually wanted to answer your question.
Well, how do you avoid? Are you talking to me or Frank?
Wait, Action.
Wait, you, sorry.
Give me a second.
Action, take your time.
Yeah. Action, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
So I just wanted to answer your question about my God claim.
Oh yeah, go for it, brother.
Okay, so essentially everybody is their own God in their own worldview. So in my worldview, in my personal life, I am my own God. No one should be above me. No thing should be above me. Because if I do let somebody above me, I have a potential of running into abuse and pain. And a lot of bad things can happen. You can see this with like Jonestown. So that's my God claim. Essentially, you should basically treat yourself the best way possible. And then once your needs are met, you can umbrella down into like what other people deserve, like what your needs are. So like your wife, your family, and then trickle down. But that's basically my God claim.
That's just definitional though, right? That's not
basically, yeah. It's just
composition division fallacy though, because that's obviously not the type of God we're talking about.
Does it matter?
It's not a type of God. That's a complete incorrect term. Completely. It's God to me is everything. It's the first necessity. Everything. There cannot be, to me, a natural cause for everything. It's logical that it will infinite regress down. Mathematics will then have to prove, and logic, that an infinite regression cannot be contained, or that it can.
Yeah, I think,
and mathematics is logic and proof. Physicality. Sorry, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that the biggest issue with science that I have personally is the fact that, I mean, science does say that consciousness arose naturally. So, is it possible that consciousness arose before we even existed in a different form, and
Yeah,
that consciousness gave rise to the universe? Isn't that possible
exactly.
naturally as well? And that's this is my opinion on it. I'm not sure what you guys believe.
What it
I
really
do
does
believe.
goes against Occam's razor. Okay, you're asserting so much into this that it goes against simplicity. Simplicity is the most logical by far. For you to assert something that's complex like consciousness, you would need something to back it up besides just an assertion, in my opinion.
So I've got a response.
Go for it.
So I've been working on my, I don't want to say worldview because I feel like that's a theistic term, but I've been trying to understand everything. And I asked somebody cool some questions and he helped out. And term I've been looking for. So I'm an identity theorist. So brain states are generally going to be identical to like mental states, right? And so it's a naturalist or a physicalist, I guess, is the term you want.
Yeah, physicalist.
It's all
Monist.
neurons firing and whatever actually describes a brain, right? Somebody can explain it way better than I can. But I mean, that's a scientific hypothesis with data. Identity theory is. I mean, saying something that like consciousness is fundamental. Sure, you can say that. Yeah, you can say that and be like, is there a contradiction with that? And be like, oh yeah, that's logically possible, right? But you have to ground it, and like identity theory is grounded, and there's all sorts of other theories, or well, hypotheses and whatnot, but that are actually grounded, right? And that's just not something that has data, so that's kind of a weird position to take.
Well, two things I wanted to say. First, is strong. I wanted to say, I understand your point of the Occam's razor if it has to be like a simple explanation, but my whole theory about it is like even if you believe that what's fundamental is like a vacuum field, like a quantum field or something like that, you have to explain what causes the quantum field to change into or gives rise to the universe, like what caused that change in the quantum field. So there's always a need for an explanation beyond just the natural physical explanation, because there has to be something that can cause change as well. And I mean and that's just my opinion, you know. So uh,
So
Space, time,
yeah,
and entropy.
you done? So first of
yeah,
all,
yeah.
though, the what you said, it's not that the complex explanation is ruled out. It's just Occam's razor is that the simplest explanation is most likely, and just to assert this level of complexity into the beginning of the universe, into consciousness existing at that point, is just past what we can understand based on what we know about minds, which seem to go from simple towards complex. Any minds that we know of evolve from
Right.
simplicity to
Well, strong. I'm not saying it's a mind, and that's where me and the theist would kind of have a conflict. I don't think when you think about mind, I think about thoughts, and I don't think that what's fundamental has thoughts. I don't think it can think. I just think it has some sort of awareness, and that's the difference. Like
awareness is
because
thought. Awareness
Strong.
is
When
no,
in
not
doubt,
necessarily, not necessarily, because
Frank.
almost. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So Strong brought up a good point, right? So when we look back at the evolutionary chain and we look at our brain, we see our brain has developed in stages, right? And like at its core, it's the emotional brain, right? And then And so that's like our lizard brain people say. That was one of the first things to develop. That was one of like the most important survival mechanisms. The ones that developed that early on survived, right? The fear mechanism. And so that has been passed on to over years and years, and it's continued to develop around that. And we see different brains and all sorts of mammals, and then we see where it splits off. You look at like lizards and other animals that are alive now, and then you trace that back. I mean, you can see how the brain developed with each of those, right? But it goes back, and you get to like maybe a single cell or multicellular organism, and all it's got is like basic sensory data. But even then, it's just responding to stimuli, right? I don't know if that would even be considered consciousness. But saying that consciousness is fundamental, I mean that what I was saying when that's a weird claim to make is. He even said Occam's razor, right? Like it appear if you look back to the beginning of the universe, everything is the most simple, and then it gets more complex over time. We saw the same thing with consciousness, is what I was just trying to point out with that example. I mean, if you want to say consciousness is fundamental, that's such a strange thing to say, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
I'm curious, Frank, about awareness not being thought.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that. So animals are aware; they don't think, right? Like they don't process information, but
yeah, they do.
Incorrect.
Well, not
This
all
is
animals.
completely.
Not all
They don't have.
animals.
They
Like,
don't have apps.
Right, actually. A great
think
deal
about
of
Hey guys, let Frank get out his thought
animals
before you attack it. Let him get out his complete thought
Yeah.
before you start attacking.
Give me a sec. All right. So, like worms, for instance, they don't think. They don't process information, but they are aware of their surroundings and they're aware of themselves. So, like, I just don't know where to draw the division and the line between being non-conscious and being conscious. At what point do you draw the line? Is it just like a mutation, or is it just like
without a brain.
I think most people say the ability to recognize themselves in the mirror.
You need a brain to communicate with the nervous system. It's as simple as that.
That could be conscious, and then what I just said could be sentience, right? Like the ability to recognize yourself in the mirror.
Sentience sentience and consciousness is to me the same thing.
right.
You need a brain to operate that and facilitate that.
Right.
You have to have a brain.
All I'm saying is like a protozoa or like a simple amoeba or something. I would say that they are conscious in the sense of they understand their surroundings and they also are aware of themselves.
Yeah.
Now, they aren't like they don't have the complex mechanisms that we do in our brain because they develop differently. They evolve differently, obviously. And natural selection selected for us to have bigger brains because we survive better with the ability that we have now. And I think the same goes for like protozoas in that they were naturally selected to not have the same type of consciousness, but I feel like they are conscious in the sense of they are aware of themselves and their surroundings. So
Fully agreed.
and I
So
would
Fully
say
agreed.
give me one
Like
second.
like a plant.
And I would say that if you break it down even further, I would say that everything is conscious to a certain degree. And that's just my opinion. I mean, you can take it for what you want.
So a logical conclusion of your worldview is that a rock is just sitting there going rock, and then when it gets split into two, it's separate.
See,
rock.
I don't think it's like
Does it
I
have
think
a brain?
they don't have a brain, but I think the particles inside of the rock are aware. They are conscious to a certain degree. Do you go
So you're talking on the QM sort of side of every single electron, and because I've seen quite contributing, posts, or should we say, information or fucking articles, should we say? Sorry, my apologies. It's very late for me. That every single electron subatomic particle is actually to an extent self-aware.
Yes, definitely. That's where I'm coming from. Like,
I agree with you.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and
100%.
I don't even like personally. I don't think that there's because like it's the way we define consciousness. It's we
Absolutely.
we define it as something with the brain. Like it's the only way that we can be conscious is if we have a brain. But it's there's different levels to consciousness. That's where I.
This, yeah. There's like a level XP, like you're playing like an online game. Like you're a higher level. This is what I mean. It's
You want to hear a fun fact?
Yeah, go for it. Actually.
20 physicality. 20 physicality. A brick
Wait,
or subatomic particles.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Go for it.
That it doesn't require a brain, but something's there. It's self-aware to an extent.
So, fun fact. So, snakes. Most snakes actually can actually show preferential bias towards their owners / habitats / enrichment. So they can actually make choices based on their individual preferences. And these are fucking snakes. Snakes are not intelligent whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. And all I'm saying is some animals can't process like thoughts. That's all I'm saying. Like they don't.
Oh, of course.
They lack that ability.
Also,
not
another fun fact.
So,
another real quick fun fact, just really fast. Did you know ravens, the birds can actually hold a grudge for like 15 years against a human if the human does something wrong to the bird?
That's interesting too.
Yeah, chimpanzees and even dogs show jealousy, but shit.
I have a question I'd like to pose to you guys.
I'm sorry, I just have a lot of useless animal facts.
It's good. I just have a question with a couple of clarifiers after it that I'd like to pose to anybody who would be willing to take it on. The question is, how do you justify your reasoning? And the clarifiers are some people's reasoning invalid?
42.
And how do you know you're not that person?
Well, that's a difficult question.
All right. Are you ready? It's 42.
So, I mean, I guess you got to trust your senses are reasonably reliable. They got our species this far, right? And we seem to be developing some type of higher thinking skills, which is kind of cool. And it's probably going to continue to improve. We see that in the brain. And as we are able to spend more time in front of a computer and less time surviving, I'm sure our brains are going to get bigger and bigger, and or develop more. You'll just get much smarter over time, I'm sure.
So, Taco, isn't circular reasoning a logical fallacy? And aren't you using reasoning to justify your reasoning?
I mean, what's the alternative? Just say that I don't know anything.
I don't know.
What do you think?
I like the alternative. The alternative is saying I don't know anything, right? Which I feel to be absurd, right? This reality seems to be objective, and it seems to exist around us, and we all seem to exist objectively in this objective reality that exists around us, and we seem to be able to communicate. And I mean, I haven't been run over by a car yet, right? I haven't been eaten by a T-Rex yet, right? And I mean, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of surviving so far, and my senses seem to be relatively it seems reasonable to trust my senses, right? Although if you want me to say I don't know anything, I could say I don't know anything, but I don't know how that's going to help.
Hey, let me give a crack at it. So, ICT, I think that the one thing that we can't not know for sure is the fact that we exist. So, the cogito ergo sum, the fact that we exist, is something that we don't even need language in order to describe the fact that we do exist. Like that's knowledge that goes beyond anything else. Like it's an inane fact of the matter, and from there we can build upon that to gain knowledge of
I
the
mean,
exterior world. But
Frank, what do you mean when you say the word "I"? Who are you referring to?
the thinking, I don't know,
not you, Taco.
experience.
You're thinking about you. You're referring to yourself when you say "I."
Yeah, but
that's how you know you exist.
Yeah, but
because you said the word "I."
Yeah, but it's
Oh,
even if I didn't know the word "I." Anyway, go.
Please let him get through his explanation. Everyone, give Frank a chance to get through his explanation, and
no, let's all file Frank.
I'll leave. I don't care. I'll leave. No, no. I was just
sorry. I just want to make a little joke.
No, it's fine. I'm just playing. Yeah, no. It's direct contact with the with yourself. So you're experiencing existence, like regardless of whether you consider that an I, or even if you don't know language at all, you have a conscious awareness of the exist of your own existence, and you can't be wrong about that. So from there you can build upon that to everything else, basically. But yeah, go ahead, guys.
I was just saying, you said the word "I," which means that you know you exist.
Right, and I know I exist because I'm experiencing existence. So it's a direct.
Can somebody cue up the Twilight Zone theme music, please?
I mean, just to ask that question would imply existence, though.
Right, and that's the point. It's like
he knows that he exists. He has experiences, which is fantastic.
You can't even deny, like, you can't even deny your own experience, your own existence, because once you do, then you are existing. So it's like it's impossible to deny the fact. That's why it's fundamental.
You remember those PTSD-ridden dreams I told you about, Taco?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're really, really realistic, almost like a parallel reality. The only time I'm ever able to diagnose what is quote unquote sleep or what is quote unquote real is with consistency. I don't know if I'm asleep right now, is what I am saying. But I'm going to go based off a hunch and say I'm not asleep right now. But I don't know because of my PTSD and my extremely vivid dreams. But with my new medication, I'm actually doing a lot better.
I think you're awake right now.
You might be asleep. I don't know.
You're definitely here with other people.
Maybe you're awake and asleep at the same time.
So
I could instead of watching on YouTube, I'd just hop in.
I could actually have a full-on conversation with multiple people in real life in a dream. And it would be like see, smell, everything about the other person. It'd be down to the exact detail. No difference than in real life when I'm not dreaming, for simplicity's sake.
Hey, Alex, would you say you gain information in your sleep too?
I'm sorry?
Would you say that you gain information in your sleep as well?
Possibly, but like I eventually, after like 20 years, because it used to be really fucking bad, and I got super suicidal because I only got like 2 hours of REM sleep and I just was miserable 24/7. I began to repress and suppress most of my dreams and or night terrors. I don't remember what happens at night.
It's apparently it's distinguished that you can't, unless you've experienced something, then it can't appear in your dreams.
That is incorrect.
If you've seen a face,
so that is incorrect. I have had vivid dreams of being completely and utterly tortured via like Saw levels of torture. I literally watched my family be burned alive and then skinned a different day.
What I'm saying is I'm sorry that you've had those, those experiences. What I'm saying is that you can't manifest a brand new face. Apparently,
Oh yeah,
from what
that.
I know,
No, I completely agree.
is yeah. So you can manifest anything that your brain, makes, but any sort of face, any experience, any place, you can't just make up a new one. I could be wrong on that, which I'm happy to,
Yeah.
take. But there's always a face. There's
maybe
always a person that you've remembered. There's always a place. It always happens at a place that you've been, and it's held in your memories. And that's so. Again, I could be wrong. I don't suffer from that, which I can only exhibit. Is honestly, I can't understand what.
Shan, I
what
could
that
actually
means.
push back on that a little bit.
Hang on, you just
Okay.
muted him for like the back half of that.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was.
I had to deafen. I'm at work currently, and I'm a little busy every now and again, so I might have to deafen every second or two.
Yeah, Alex.
But
Alex,
what's up?
I was gonna say lately I've been having dreams about my ex-girlfriend, and they've been very vivid, and like so I can relate to what you're talking about, like having dreams that. Yeah.
So Frank, let me help you out real quick. So your subconscious is really fucking weird. I looked into this a little bit and talked to my neurologist a lot. I went to my neurologist a shitload before getting diagnosed with PTSD. Because apparently it was PTSD because I was in a cult for 20 years. Anyways, side note, your subconscious is really fucking weird. Whatever you experience in your conscious reality, your subconscious will pick up and hold on to your beliefs for when you sleep or when you hallucinate. So any preconceived beliefs, like a belief in the Christian God, you could actually dream of the Christian heaven in your dream, and it could be completely fabricated because of your pre-existing beliefs or your pre-existing personal life situations.
ICP.
Yeah, it's really fucky.
Hey, while we got just a short pause, I want to let everyone know that the argument or the question that I asked was actually borrowed from Pine Creek. That was actually his line of questioning.
ICP,
Sean,
I have a question to ask you back though.
Okay.
So now that it appears that you and I both exist, that this universe exists around us, and our senses agreeably are relatively reliable. I mean, I feel like, I mean, it's better than assuming that we don't know anything, right? Which means that because we're going by these axioms, if you will. Now,
yes.
How do you personally gain knowledge?
Wait, did you need me, Taco?
No.
But you said my name.
So we can obtain knowledge, is what I'm saying. ICT. So, and we both agree on
here.
that. So how do you obtain knowledge?
How do I obtain knowledge? What do you mean by knowledge? Can you give me some sort of definition?
Stuff that you know to be true to a very reasonable degree of certainty.
How do I gain knowledge? What? Okay, so the way I would say that I gain knowledge is largely by using a model of let me get my thought here. I've got the answer. I just want to get my thought together here.
Well, can I just say, like, the way I gain knowledge is through induction, like repeatable, repeatable experiments that I do every single day, and they seem to work out the way that I want them to. So that's how I gain knowledge, is through experience. So
I was going to say that I gain knowledge through reasoning, and I believe that the success of the predictive models that can be falsified justify my reasoning, by their continued reliability at producing effective results. And that's how I gain knowledge.
Right.
I believe that we've created an institution, all sorts of institutions that provide knowledge online for free or in books for reasonable prices. And you can absolutely gain knowledge from the experts and from the institution, right? It has
science doesn't deal with facts.
But you know what the question ICTX that we haven't answered yet is like, how do you know your knowledge isn't faulty and is wrong?
Because we're alive, right?
I analyze my sense perception. That's what I do. And as long as my brain and my senses are working properly, I should be able to interpret things properly. However, of course, everything could be a hallucination, except for I think, therefore I am. I understand this, but I dismiss that because I don't need to have certainty.
Then that just means that it's completely subjective. It's completely. There's no objective truth or factual statement that you can offer.
Everybody offered something different, right? But everybody uses all of those. Those are just tools.
You can have knowledge without certainty. It's just called fallibilism. No big deal.
But you still operate off high degrees of certainty, right?
Yep.
Yes, but fallibilism comes under subjectivity.
Well,
so it's a pragmatic truth, and you're using epistemology to gain the answer. There's no 100% guarantee, probability, potentiality.
You don't need 100%. What you have is there is definitely truth that exists, but interpreting truth is subjective.
Truth is
an objective fact, but your interpretation of truth is subjective.
I want to point out that your objection is weird, right? Because he can just tie it to reality and be like, well, look, part of the way that I'm able to do this when I mean certainty, so I when I say that the sun isn't going to blow up tomorrow, right? I know that to a high degree of certainty because of all these institutions that we've built over thousands of years and all this knowledge that we've gained as a species. We've been able to figure out that the sun's not going to blow up tomorrow. Plus, I mean, that's just the way
it seems
to work day to day, right? But
you don't know it to 100%.
But that doesn't make it like an invalid position or a subjective position. It comports with reality, right?
Yeah, you don't need 100% certainty.
Exactly. I don't disagree with that. But what I'm saying is objectivity is 100% certainty. It's an objective fact. You cannot tell me as an objective fact that the sun will not blow up tomorrow.
Well,
I agree with you.
Just stupid.
It won't. But why is it stupid?
Because you're demanding him to separate from reality. You're saying separate from reality and consider my logical possibility.
No, but you're assuming that subjective beings have gained that perfect knowledge.
But you're asking him to separate from reality, enter a logic bubble, and then give you. Oh yeah, that's a good point. You could logically see that possibility, right? And then enter back into his realm of epistemology. How can you do that? Do you not see why that objection is ridiculous?
Right. So, okay, I'll put it as in simple terms. Can you guarantee 100% certainty that the sun won't blow up tomorrow?
Absolutely not.
100%.
99.999999999 repeating, of course.
So you cannot gain by certainty, by objectivity, by guaranteed facts that the sun won't blow up tomorrow. Is that what you're saying? No.
We built up to this point, and it's reasonably reliable, and
that's not what I'm asking.
High degrees of certainty. He's saying he can claim knowledge.
Taco,
and you're saying that.
Taco.
But he's saying he can gain knowledge
Thomas,
there,
and
you're saying no, he can't.
Talking over him.
Taco, go ahead.
Yeah, he's saying, or you're saying that he can't gain knowledge there, and well, he went, I gain knowledge this way, and then you're saying, no, you can't gain knowledge this way. If you're not a fallibilist, I guess that you can't gain knowledge that way, but that would be a weird position to hold.
No, knowledge is 100% certainty. It's knowledge. It's gained.
We just described different ways.
Give him the same respect, Taco. Give him the same respect I asked him to give you. Let him finish his argument before you start talking. We have to do this. If we talk over each other, we're not going to have any type of a conversation.
Yeah, let him finish. Go ahead.
Objectivity. You can interpret this information, all right, like everyone that has gained the star, the sun, the weight, the mass, the fusion, everything like that. Is that guaranteed? Materialism is a pursuit of knowledge. It's not a guarantee. It will be refined years and years and years to come. Same will be with relativity, quantum mechanics, and you cannot guarantee 100% by objectivity, by knowledge, by fact, by proof that the sun won't blow up tomorrow.
So, Sean,
it's as simple as that. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So there's a deer blind or a corn feed thing for deer. I don't know what those are called, but there's a corn feed thing set up, right? And these hunters are going and they're walking along the edge of the woods, or looking for like bushes and stuff that might have been trampled over, maybe bits of hair that might be rubbed up on a tree, maybe something that looks like horn marks or something, and they find some right near. Going through they find a little trail, they find a little bit of hair, they find some deer droppings, and they're like, oh yeah, this looks awesome, right? And so they go and they set up a stand, right? And they've got this hundreds of dollars of equipment set up. They've got $1,000 rifles, right? And they're going to go get some deer so that they can make some jerky, because that's their favorite thing ever, right? And these guys have been hunting deer all their lives, right? They just identified all sorts of cool stuff. And so they go up, and they set up in their deer stand, and they're waiting because they know that deer travel through there, right? And they're, it's like, hey, they probably eat here every day, right? And so they go up there, they set up. Now they don't have absolute knowledge, right? But in that example I gave, they're set up with high degrees of certainty, and they're operating with high degrees of certainty, right? And he's saying, I operate with high degrees of certainty, and you're saying that's not okay. Right. And that's a strange objection, because he told you how he operates. And that's what I'm pointing out. Like he's saying that's how you can gain knowledge. And you're saying that's not how you can gain knowledge. And I just gave an example of how that could lead to a successful deer hunt.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sean, Johnny Osis, what do you know for 100% certainty?
Nothing.
Okay,
apart from if I just explain what I genuinely observe. My child had spaghetti bolognese today.
So could you be hallucinating?
Guaranteed.
Could you be hallucinating?
Yeah, I think we're confusing ontology and epistemology. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think that this is where it's going. Is is ontology over epistemology. What I'm saying is that there is no guarantee, there's no proofs, nothing like that in a material world. It's under mathematics and logic.
Well, like Frank was saying earlier, I think, therefore I am. That can be 100% certain. You can't really dismiss that too easily, if at all. I don't think you can.
No, exactly. No, exactly.
Other than that, though, I don't think anything can be 100% certain, and so you have to have some knowledge. So you just be a fallibleist, and you can claim knowledge without 100% certainty.
One thing that I do accept.
Shawnee, let Nirvana talk, because he just came up and he probably wants to say something.
Oh, sure. How you doing?
All right. Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm mute.
So to answer the question about like, is there something that I can know for certain? I don't necessarily hold this belief, but what's your argument against saying that there are things that I don't know? That I'm 100% certain that there are things that I don't know.
Could you be hallucinating?
That's something I wouldn't know. So
you might not if you're hallucinating.
Yeah, so it'd be true that I could be certain about, whether I know things or not.
You anything could be a hallucination.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's the point, right? Like there would be something that I don't know, and then there would be like the term set up for where there are things that I don't know. So I'd be like completely certain that there are things.
What do you claim 100% certainty on?
That he doesn't know, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. That there are things that I don't know.
Right. So he's certain about the fact that he doesn't know anything, or doesn't know everything, basically.
I believe you're certain of that. That's fair.
Yep, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one.
Or could you be certain if you have certainty about being uncertain?
I guess so. I guess you could be. You would be.
Yeah, circular reasoning there.
Suppose you were hallucinating your whole life.
Yeah, it would just here's the thing. It would just be true after the fact that there were things that I don't know. Like saying I'm certain about something would mean like that I know for a fact that there are things that I don't know. But like if I'm hallucinating, then it's true that there are things that I don't know. So it's like two separate issues.
So, Sean, why do you value objectivity so much?
So, Nirvana, would you say that it's better for you to say I don't know anything rather than saying like I do know things, like I know about the external world, like instead of just saying I'm not certain, therefore I know, or that I'm not certain, or
so like your question is like, is it better to like just claim complete agnosticism, like that there's this thing on everything? I mean, like, I'd say that that's the most honest approach. But like, if you're going to like start using things or like start approaching like how am I gonna frame my epistemology? Like, what works the best, or like what's most pragmatic for me to like believe? Am I going to act under the guise that there are things that I don't know, or am I going to just start making assumptions and then work from there?
Nirvana, anything else that you're certain of 100%?
I don't actually even really claim certainty on those things. I just thought it was an interesting question.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I think Nirvana has nailed it. To be quite honest, there's nothing that you can know, apart from anything that you observe directly that can't be disputed. And anything else, it relies on the reality around you, people around you. They change your reality. So you can't know those things. You have a belief. My girlfriend loves me, for example. That will change my reality around me.
Sean.
But I don't know that. And
Sean, would you say that there's no such thing as objective truth?
No, I believe that there is objective truth through through physicalism, through materialism. But we just can't gain that truth because we're subjective beings. We interpret it in a different way.
Yeah, I would
We
agree.
could be,
Our own way, and we have feelings and thoughts about that. We have enticements about certain things, who I love, who I don't, who I hate, what I want to do, what I don't want to do. I think that just plays a main significant role.
but we could be right. We just might not know that we're right. We certainly could be right.
Exactly.
Even
So,
yeah.
Are you saying that we're subjective beings and that, like, we didn't know that, I don't know, like microwave background radiation existed until we created something to detect it? And then we knew that it existed at that point? Is that what you mean? Like
No. I believe that objectively it exists. It's just subjectively, as a human, they were the first to discover it. It already existed.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with Sean on this. I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible for us to know objective truth, because regardless of whether it's subjective or not, we're still like determining that through a subjective mind. So it's almost impossible for you to have objective truth at that point.
Yeah, well,
why does it matter though?
Well, I'm just saying, it's
What
just
do you mean? What does it matter? Well, so it's like me saying that the best color is green, and you saying the best color is red. What
It's not at
truthful
all.
statement comes from that?
That's a false equivalency.
well, here's
I'm real quick.
Okay, I like fish and you like meat.
It's a false equivalency.
Real quick, I'm subjectively going to bed. Have a good night.
Good night, Strong.
Enjoy.
Hey, I'd like to share a thought with you guys real quick, but I'll go
Sure.
out right after Nirvana because he just got here, so I'd like to give him a chance to say something. I know he's trying to get in some words edgeways.
no, you're okay. So you're talking about like subjective claims like red is better than green or like green is better than red, like things like that, right? Like, so a lot of people, and this isn't like kind of like the similar thing earlier. This isn't really my idea, but a lot of people will make the claim that there is objective truth, and the fact of whether we disagree on something or not doesn't really affect that objective truth. It just means that certain people are incorrectly reasoning, right? Like, so like, let's say for instance, you have a law like murder is illegal, and then I say murder is illegal, by the law, the murder is illegal. And then a guy comes into the room and he says, no, murder's not illegal. It's kind of similar like that. Just because we disagree on it doesn't mean that there's not an objective standard that somebody's just reasoning incorrectly away from. And I was just kind of interested in seeing like, there's approaches like this, like Kantian ethics, where, where people will say like, there is an objective truth to morality, but people are just reasoning incorrectly. And I think that I could be completely misrepresenting them, but I believe that actually is what the Kantian ethicists believe leads to things being immoral, is just incorrect reasoning.
Hey,
so I was actually
Nirvana. I was gonna ask, are they Platonists, or do they believe like there's an object out there that instantiates morality, or go for it?
I think you definitely could be, but I don't think I haven't really talked to one that would describe themselves as a Platonist or a Neoplatonist or anything like that. But I could definitely see like somebody including Kantian ethics and Neoplatonism into their worldview and it being like internally somewhat consistent.
So I wonder if you guys would allow me to summarize a couple of things that I took away from this conversation, because I'm in a learning mode, and I want to see if I can get some validation. So one of the things I took away was that knowledge implies knowing, and then it was demonstrated that we actually know very little to 100% certainty. So it seemed that it would follow that the reality that we exist in, we operate largely on probability rather than 100% knowing anything. And when things reach a certain high level of probability, then we would consider that knowledge. Does that make sense?
That's very fair.
So I have a question for the room more so. What do you guys, and I obviously know what we mean, but this is for question's sake. What do you guys mean when you say certainty? Like, what is that?
Likelihood?
It's irregardless of anything else.
Yeah, like likelihood of or probability of something occurring or not occurring. Or
I would say certainty means without doubt.
There you go. Yeah.
And Nirvana, I would add to that I think we get there kind of the same way that I just explained. I think once you get to a very high level of probability, I would say that at least the individual becomes certain at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just the epistemology that you've gained enough sort of sources where you've justified, your reasoning, where 95%, that you're going to be right, but certainty, factual statements, you can't claim it as objective like you can with math and logic without 100% claiming it as a law, like thermodynamics or anything like that.
Can I?
I pointed out that your objection earlier was a false equivalency, and you jumped back to it now, and you just use that for your conclusion. But you arrived there via fallacious reasoning because you were comparing subjectivity on the best color, such as red or green, to you called it subjectivity, but something like the scientific method, where we look at like a scientific theory that's to a very high degree of certainty true, and you compared the two, and I pointed out that was fallacious reasoning, and you continued to your conclusion.
Okay, so there is no perfect color. There's no guarantee that brown is better than blue, for example.
Which
the universe requires. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the universe requires for a subjective being to like that color.
Hey,
which is not objective.
Speaking about this, since Taco's kind of pointing out faulty reasoning, I was going to ask the same question ICT had asked the room before. What causes people to have like faulty reasoning or like come to a wrong conclusion? If Nirvana wants to cover that
What causes people to be fallibilistic?
No, not necessarily fallibilistic, but come to like wrong conclusions, basically. Like for instance, like an atheist thinking that God doesn't exist, or an atheist thinking God does exist, like that kind of reasoning.
Well, like, I mean, the obvious answer, I feel like, well, I think kind of what I was saying is like somewhat around there, like, we are fallibilists, like, by nature. So, like,
yeah,
humans, I mean, it's pretty much just a result of that. Like, we don't have the cognitive abilities to be able to answer certain questions, and a lot of those questions just happen to be below other questions. So, like, if I'm looking at my lamp, right, and I see a light and it's like touching and I see the lamp is shining on my table, it could be the case that the lamp is actually off and this is a complete, like, just figment of my imagination, but my brain and just the way that I've made up just doesn't have the power really to answer like some of these like underdetermining factors really. So like it's just kind of like that. It's just kind of the way we are. If if it had like an answer like this, I actually had to talk with this to somebody. Like if it like at some point, like always, like, you know, your knowledge comes to an end about something and you just start making like kind of assumptions and axioms. So like, is it, you know, useful for me to believe that every time that I'm looking at something that it might be a figment of my imagination, or is it good to just keep that in the back of my mind and just assume like the light is on for, you know, practical usage? And I think that that's more interesting and more like useful. It doesn't, you know, it's not saying that like having knowledge that like you could make errors is useless, because that's actually a good, whenever you're discussing things against precepts, you know, that's a good thing to talk about. It's like when they start talking about things like logical absolutes, it's like, what does that even mean? But yeah.
So Nirvana, it's almost like I hate fucking onions and mushrooms. Do you like those?
I don't like either. but
oh well, that fucks me in the ass. No. Jake slides. Does anyone else like mushrooms and fucking onions?
Let's pretend I do.
Right. Okay. It's almost like the same presupposition. It relies off of the interpreter to distinguish if it's coherent. And like myself, I can't fucking stand them. And it wouldn't be so bad, but it's every single thing, every thought, and every process that goes through any person's ideology, or, you know, their brain function, they decide before physicality takes the head. In other words, you put an onion in your mouth and you don't like them, you're going to taste it after the fact that you know it's a fucking onion.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's completely withdrawn, where we learn every single thing that we do and we adapt. So it's
Jonas, I want to ask you a favor, my friend. You're starting to dominate the conversation, and a lot of the things you're saying seem to be, with no disrespect intended, seem to be a little incoherent. So I'd like to ask you if you wouldn't mind listening just a little more and letting some of the other people talk, and then interject your well thought out thoughts. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful manner.
Yeah, I would just say the same thing. I kind of agree with Sean with the whole subjective objective thing. Like the fact of the matter is, everything that is objective is we determine it through our subjective mind. So it's almost impossible for you to have objectivity in that point. That's just my opinion, though.
Thank you.
Why does it matter, though?
It does. So I can actually explain why it does matter. Specifically, like whenever you're, like I was saying earlier, whenever you come across like these theistic debaters that will start talking to you about things like that need some sort of instantiation, like they have some sort of like extant property, like they'll start trying to pretend that logic is something that is not mind dependent and functions solely on its own, really. And if you take the view that there is no objectivity and you like kind of go like in a nominalistic direction, you can just reject that proposition completely and ask them to. Yeah. You can ask them to support the claim that logic is something that is extant of the brain.
I'm a nominalist, absolutely. I'm totally agree with you.
Yeah, I am too. So, yep.
Nirvana, how do you account for the laws of logic?
I don't.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough.
Yep.
I think the big.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing to ask somebody when they say how do you account for something is what the hell do they mean by account? Like, what is that? Yeah, what is asking me to account for something really even mean? Like, are they trying to ask me? What they really want you to do is answer what created the laws of logic, or like what was the precedent for X to exist? And and my obvious answer is I think that it's something that we made up because it's useful, and until it stops seeming useful, I'm just going to keep using it. That's not an original thought or anything. Tom agrees.
The conclusion of what you're saying, what you guys have been saying, is that you can't have knowledge, right?
You can have fallible knowledge.
Because, well, when I asked, I see how does he gain knowledge, right? And knowledge, by definition, is objective, isn't it?
So it depends on like what you mean by objective. Like, are you saying like there could be knowledge, right? And like for because of Gettier cases,
facts, information, and skills acquired by a person through experience or education, the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. That's objective. That's how you gain information. It's by definition objective.
Yeah, well, hold up. Let's say if we take like I said, like if you take like the classical knowledge just by true belief definition, and you accept the fact that like you can be wrong about things, or like you could have knowledge of something prior to the fact of finding out that knowledge is not actually knowledge. It would still be the case that like if you have one claim that you have like justified true belief for, let's say like a clock on the wall, and it says it's 7:30, and then the clock next to it like says 7:35. I mean, this is a clock example they usually use for like Gettier cases, but like let's say one of them is right, and I believe 7:30 is wrong, like the right one, but it turns out that 7:35 is actually what the time is. It's still the case that knowledge existed after the fact of me being wrong about it. It just means that I reached the conclusion of what that knowledge was just a little bit later.
Nice. It still exists. It's still there.
Yeah, but that's basically what I was saying. Is like the knowledge is still there, whether you're wrong about it or not. Like, do I think that
it's fundamental? Yeah.
Do I think the knowledge is something that exists extant of a mind? No, absolutely not. I think that knowledge is just like kind of an attempt to make things coherent to us.
Well, the universe exists and all the laws and everything are there. We're just observing them. So, the objectivity, the laws, everything exists.
But I do have to ask this question, like, will a rock exist if you no longer exist? Like, would that be like an objective truth? Like, when I die or when I don't exist anymore, the rock still exists. Like, is that a possibility, or do we interpret the world based on our subjective mind? So it like, are you guys understanding where I'm coming from?
So you're asking like, does the rock exist after my mind stops existing? Like,
right.
Like, is that like you're questioning essentially the relationship between the brain's attempts
the experience is still there,
the rock's phenomena, and after the fact, even if you're not having a phenomenal experience of the rock, whether it still exists or not, and if that's a objective truth that exists extant of a mind.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I don't think that we could know that, but I also don't think that that's really an objective truth. I think that like saying something exists is a brain's way, or a brain is a human with a brain's attempt at trying to like kind of conceive of something or like understand something or recognize something.
Yeah, the human mind wants to rationalize anything it can. Even if it doesn't know what it is, it's going to.
It's a really good actual analogy, to be fair.
But if that's an objective truth, I would say that what is the truth relying on if there's no mind to recognize it as the truth?
Yeah, you're right,
exactly.
Ron. Like that's basically where I'm coming from. Like that's how I understand it. Like that's why I'm not sure about objective truth and like if we can actually attain that in reality. So
well, you always have underdetermination that you have to bite the bullet on.
Sounds like you're making a claim of a rock being contingent on a mind. How do you get there when the methodological naturalistic universe that we seem to know exists and works in a certain way, and then it leads to a rock existing, and you're posing that rock is contingent on the mind?
No. So I'm saying that truth is a human constructed phenomena, and truth is a human constructed phenomena that is used as an attempt to try to make things comprehensible for ourselves. So like, if I say like, is it true that the rock exists after the fact that I die? What is the truth heading to? Like, what is receiving the truth and recognizing it as truth? You know, the rock could still exist after the fact.
Yeah, truth is a human construct.
Yeah, and so like,
what
it could exist, but you know, I don't necessarily know if I would accept that as like, if it were the case that the rock existed after like my death, and I could know that for certain, then yeah, obviously so. But you always have, like I was trying to get at earlier, you always have underdetermined. I'm not an idealist, if that was what you were trying to get at. I don't believe that like the mind or the reality is a projection of the mind. I don't believe any of that.
I mean, I think you could look at the chain of skeletons and decaying bodies and recently buried people to now, and that would probably be a safe thing to assume, right?
Yeah, but you still have, like I was trying to get at, you still have underdetermination. Like, you know, is the skeleton actually real? You know, is this actually like a, you know, you can always discard that. But, you know, by saying like fallibilism, you know, I don't have to have certainty for some knowledge.
We agreed earlier that there's an objective reality that exists around us, that we exist, and that we can come to some form of certainty or knowledge.
No. So I agree that reality exists. I don't believe that for one, here's an example. If you're going to start trying to define objective reality, you have to go through a bunch of definitions, and you have to keep going through definitions until we both agree with one, and then we have to establish why we've decided to agree on that one. So I believe that a reality exists, but I also accept the fact that I could be wrong about that.
Fallible knowledge.
But so do you not know that you exist?
What do you mean by exist?
When you say the word I, who are you referencing?
I believe myself. But like
experience exists.
Yeah,
the person is actually experiencing it, which would fall under physicality.
Nirvana, could you possibly say existence is being? Does that make sense? Or
but here's the thing: is that we're getting down to the bare basics of where our knowledge ends. And if we're going to start trying to say like existence. Experience entails existence. Like that's one of the biggest arguments. Or like being, you know, everybody has a different definition of like what entails existence, and a million people think they're right about it. And on top of that, if you're going to use something like experience as a property of existence and then recursively use that to try and establish that what you're experiencing defines your existence into like objective truth, then that's a circular argument, begs the question.
I think that, of course, when I kick the bucket, is say I died inside of a sealed vessel where nothing could go in and out, there'd be the same number of particles in there before I died and after I died.
Is this based on physicality or
Literally be the same number of particles before and after
or
death.
anything else? If you don't mind me asking.
Hey, God 420, how would you know that though? How do you know that? Since you don't exist anymore, you're not alive.
No, that's
The corpse will be there for somebody to find it or something.
But you wouldn't know that anymore, would you?
My brain, which is already dead at that point in time, wouldn't have to know it. The next person that walks into that room or animal that walks in that room and finds my body will definitely know that the body is there. If it comes across it.
Nirvana, you still there?
Until something removes it or it gets carried off.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, okay. You broke up for a bit though.
yeah, I was Taka's headset died also. Essentially what I was saying is like if we already have a set definition of experience, I can just question what that means, right? What is experience? Like, and all we're going to do is just be able to come up with like other words that are kind of like synonymous to like what experience is. And actually Gaspar and I have talked about this before, like talking about identity and stuff like that. But I'm a little bit, I think, more liberal than he is on it. But anyways, so like one of the examples that we were talking about is like if we're talking about like existence, like I don't really necessarily try to like justify that I objectively exist. I just say that it's like self-evident that I exist. To me, like it's an axiom.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to like say, you know, experience justifies that I exist, I have experience, therefore I exist. If experience is already like a property of existence and it's being assumed for the sake that, oh, I have experience, therefore I exist, it just seems like it begs the question a bit. So I just say that it's self-evident that I exist and end it there. But I don't try to claim like that because of that it's a self-evident truth or that it's anything other than like an axiom at that point.
Yeah.
Is it okay to Is it okay to use axioms, Nirvana? Is that like perfectly fine, or do you see any problems with it?
No, you have to because Munchausen trilemma.
It's modal. Yeah, it's.
Can you explain the Munchausen trilemma for us, Nirvana?
Yeah, so essentially all like claims will eventually boil down to three stances. So you have the circular claim, then you have the axiomatic claim, and then you have infinite regress. Right. So essentially I find it easier to reject circular claims and just take the self-evident route that there's things that I can't necessarily explain, but that I assume to be the case.
Is that the same as brute facts?
Well, what do you mean by
like a fact that requires no explanation?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like a fundamental fact, like you can't really explain like why it is. It just is. Right. I'd say brute facts and axioms are, I think synonymous, but I mean I could be wrong. There might be a particular difference that I'm missing. But yeah, I think they're synonymous. So yeah, because here's the thing: if you could explain something underneath the axiom, like if you could provide a justification for the axiom, it'd no longer be an axiom anymore. It would just, the thing that would be below it, the explanation for the axiom, would then be the axiom.
This is what happens when you keep questioning yourself constantly. So you know what I mean? Just trying to find the answers to things, and then you hit that
For some
brick
reason,
wall.
I I never really questioned myself when it comes to knowing if I exist or not.
I think that it's worth questioning because I don't find an issue biting the bullet on it, because everybody else assumes for the sake of their arguments that they exist. Pre-subs assume for the sake of their arguments that they exist because without existence they wouldn't be able to have revelation from God. Like, everybody has autonomous reasoning, so like everybody uses autonomous reasoning. So in a sense that because of their autonomous reasoning, they are assuming for the fact that they exist. So I mean, I just accept that I can't necessarily justify it, and that my explanation for it is a little bit unfounded, but it's useful. So that's all that matters.
Well, I'm pretty certain that
that's the Sam Harris sort of argument, and it's interesting, going forward. And I mean, what I will say, guys, is I'm going to jump off. It's fucking like 4:45 in the morning, and I'm working in 2.5 hours. 7.
I'll go
But
to bed then.
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you ever so much, guys.
Hey,
But
back.
yeah, but
Take care,
but thank. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said you take care then. Party on.
But yeah,
Let me know if you make it work
guys.
without
Most
falling
importantly, it's been a lovely
Don't
evening.
go scuba diving.
Yep.
See you later, brother.
All right. I'll chat to you all guys later.
And kind of going back to Frank's discussion about when he dies and his brain no longer function, would the rock still be there? It seems, I kind of remember a conversation, or someone telling me about a conversation that happened between Einstein and I think it was Bohr's, one of his colleagues, about the discussion on quantum physics, something along the lines of, does the moon exist if once you're no longer looking at it? Are you familiar with that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's based on an entanglement.
Yeah, I'm aware of these.
So, it still exists, but
what was he? What was Einstein driving at, and why did Bohr's? I believe Bohr's response was something to the effect of, even if it was untrue, how could you ever prove it? I just wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, and maybe it would tie a little bit into Frank's and yours discussion earlier.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar enough to be able to talk about it in a way that would probably be meaningful or helpful for anybody.
If the moon didn't exist when people didn't see it, it would affect the tides in a
But if the moon didn't exist when people see it, I think actually Beowulf had a discussion a long time ago in my server about this. He's in the audience, and I think it had to do with like parsimony. Maybe Beowulf is aware of what I'm talking about and has an explanation, but it had to do with, I think, solipsism, and it talked about like whether the universe was like a simulation or something like that, and that it like entails that if like the universe is a simulation, that it's like
but he's scared to come up.
Who disconnected? We lost like 4 people.
I never touched it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if they just dropped out or what happened. I haven't disconnected anybody.
I'm still here. I just went to the audience, so.
No, you're good. So Beowulf, do you remember?
Yeah. So, it was a bit of a different question, but that was exactly the way I went with it. Was I made the argument from parsimony because it seemed that if there was no information lost in between times when you saw the moon, the first time versus when you saw the moon the second time, that the explanation requires that all of that information gets stored somewhere. right? And whatever the somewhere is an extra thing you need.
Yeah.
Right, and on that grounds, I reject it based on parsimony.
I just the reason I was asking is because it's pretty much the closest that I could get to do something that was around what I've talked about before or heard somebody talked about before. Because I want to be honest, I'm not very familiar with the thing you're talking about. Yeah, so if you do want to like ICT, if you want to send me that, I'll be the first to admit that I barely do any reading outside of like class.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm out of class now. I graduated, so that's pretty much all I've done.
You must have celebrated when you got out of school.
I actually had another discussion that was a bit more instructive on my view on this, which was I was talking to an idealist about if I enter a room and I see a lamp, right, and then I exit the room and I tell him there is a lamp inside of that room, right? And he's an idealist, so essentially the lamp doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
I asked him, well, are you now in possession of knowledge about what you are likely to see when you enter the room? Right?
Yeah.
And he said, yes. And then I said, but what about a third party? If I tell you that there's a lamp in the room, are you now in possession of knowledge about what a third party is likely to see when they enter the room? Because that person hasn't been primed to what's in the room at all. In which case, the knowledge about what's in the room resides with you and I. So how does the third person know what they're supposed to see if that information isn't stored somewhere?
This kind of gets into like close to the problem of other minds, and I think that's what Sully and I have talked about, actually, that idealism is like internally consistent except for that, and that's right. Pretty much
yeah. It's necessary that if you believe that I tell you there's a lamp in the room, that now you're in possession of knowledge about what a third party is going to see. Well, now you have to explain how that information was conserved. It isn't conserved in the person that walks in there. Is it conserved by the room? But the room doesn't exist. So where is that information held?
Yeah. And even more questionable is why. Right. Why is that out with the same result for the other minds?
Right. You could just as easily expect that the third party would walk in the room and see an elephant. Yeah. Right. There's no reason that the room has to present as a lamp.
Yeah.
But it's literally the exact same problem as the moon problem.
So hopefully that was a little bit productive, ICT.
Definitely. I sent you that the link for that also, Nirvana.
Is Bohr an idealist, or is Einstein an idealist, or do you know?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I hate reading. So I have, I've done the bare minimum when it comes to it. You know, I read mainly from my phone, rarely books, unless it's like something I read when I was in college until, and I'm going back, thankfully. So.
Yeah, I don't know. God doesn't play dice with the universe would be an incredibly weird quote for an idealist.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, Wolf, that's a very good point.
Hey, I was gonna ask you guys, do you guys believe in randomness or like a chance universe, or do you guys think it's like necessary? Like, where you guys at with that?
I'll answer first. I don't believe it matters because I don't see any difference between a universe that has actual randomness as a feature versus a universe in which I am incapable of perceiving what I would need to understand that it wasn't random, and it's not illogical, or it's not logically impossible either way, right? So it could be that like quantum things are determined, but I am logically incapable of understanding what determines it. And as long as that exists, then there is no difference between whether the universe is determined or not, in which case asking the question doesn't matter.
For myself, I tend to believe both. I tend to think along the lines of randomness and determinism. Both describe what we experience. I don't believe that there is any free will. I believe things are either random or determined.
Yeah, I was just asking because I was watching one of Tom's debates, and he said something about randomness is fundamental, or like that's what scientists believe, and I'm not really sure where you guys stand on that.
Oh, so as far as that goes, if he's, I suspect he was talking about like, uh, quantum scales and atomic scales. I mean, I'm just going to do what he does and go with the consensus on that, and I believe it is a consensus that, at least currently in the field, that most most experts in the field believe that there is true randomness as a feature of the quantum world.
I haven't watched.
I mean, but you're right, Bill. It wouldn't there wouldn't be a difference either way. So, I mean, I totally agree with
Well,
that. So.
yeah, the thing is that if it's possible that we discover some determined, like some kind of determinism, in the quantum realm, then neat, cool. I'm fully on board with it, right? But I see no difference between two completely logically possible outcomes where either it's necessarily the knowledge is withheld from me, and so it just looks random, versus it is actually random. I don't see any difference or any reason to care.
Right. But what do you say to like Darth Dawkins when he starts going on his tirade about we live in a chance universe and therefore da 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 da? He what do you think about his explanation?
So you're gonna catch me on a back foot here a little bit. I haven't listened to Darth Dawkins for a long time because well, it's Darth Dawkins. Uh, like honestly, I don't think anything Darth Dawkins says matters, because essentially all he is saying is there is something you don't know, therefore your worldview falls apart. It's literally all he's saying. Because the very moment he asks you a question and your answer is "I don't know," that's when he'll tell you that your worldview failed.
Who invited me?
I did, CP. You generally, for the most part, have very very intelligent discussion and ask interesting questions, and I invited you in the hopes that maybe it would spawn more conversation.
That's messed up, ICT. You never invite me.
What's going on?
Well, if you can jump in my conversation anytime soon.
Go ahead, CP. What you got?
I don't have anything. I was just asking what you guys got.
Oh, well, good. Then he's got exactly what I have.
Do gods exist, CEP?
Sure.
You kind of let me down, man. that's not very thought provoking.
Well, I mean, I answered your question.
Okay.
Do you think gods exist?
If you say the question that simplistically, strangely, I'm going to say yes, but only because there's some wacko out there that thinks spoons are gods and spoons exist. Right? Like there are people out there that will say something that does exist is a god, and I'll be like, "Yep, your god exists. I don't know why you call it a god, but it does." So if you ask a sort of simplistic question, do gods exist? I mean, I'm going to say yes.
Take it something more specific was in mind, though.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I think the question sort of entails: do gods exist? Maybe more along the lines of what people who practice the Abrahamic religions would define as God.
That's where the controversies begin. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you get to, Abrahamic religions, I'm going now to say I don't believe so, and I think likely not. I stop at it's impossible for the most part, because even though, you've got what the Bible says about God, which seems self-contradictory to me, and you've got what the Quran says about God and seems self-contradictory, and then you have what Torah says about God, it seems self-contradictory. You still have people in these faiths that will define a God that isn't necessarily self-contradictory. So
usually when people pop the question about does God exist, they're not asking it specifically like in a theological context, like involving citations of sacred scripture of some kind or another. They're instead asking more the philosophical theology area, where we tried with argument or with reason to demonstrate the proposition that God exists.
Right.
So there we wouldn't be worrying about the exegesis of some sacred text, right? We would be just trying just with reason alone to get to the proposition of
when somebody says Abrahamic,
so James Cornman actually wrote in 1980 in a book titled Skepticism, Justification, and Explanation. He writes that when we want to demonstrate some proposition of the form, there exists there is at least one z such that p is z, something like that. He's like, the most direct route to get it will just, like, those sort of argument forms will just beg the question almost all the time. All right. So he's like, we can't directly get the existence of some p, unless of course there was like some empirical evidence. Then he's like, well, then of course you have it. And the idea was that if you have, like, let's say, if you can establish that sort of existential proposition, then you can also easily establish belief in that existential proposition. Then you can also demonstrate that it's more reasonable to believe that existential proposition than to not believe that existential proposition. But he's like, but if you can't directly get via evidence that just that existential proposition, like it's deduction, then he's like, then you have to go by more roundabout means, starting from some weaker proposition, like, well, you believe that that existential proposition is the case. It's like, that's weaker. It's, but you still might be able to find some way to get up to just the demonstration of that existential proposition. So he devoted an entire book to just the existence of physical objects that are not currently in our perception. and also the existence of past events that maybe we have no memory of. And he like was very like intent on saying like this is a tentative kind of work where he's like, even with just these modest goals of demonstrating or refuting skeptical theses about such basic things, is like it takes quite a bit of effort and argumentation to put together, because like he said, you can't just go about demonstrating the existence of something right off the bat without begging the question. It can't be done that way. So something more ambitious, like say the existence of God, on the other hand, that's going to take an even enormous more output to arrive at that. It couldn't just be some argument from the 5 ways, for instance, right? That's not going to do it.
So I was going to ask you guys, since you guys just came in here, and it's a question that we were talking about before, but I wanted to get you guys' take on it. How do you, like, if, for instance, someone is a theist and they believe in a God, and so, like, them getting to that conclusion, is it because of faulty reasoning, or what causes that them to arrive at that conclusion? Is it, are they correct, or are they incorrect in their reasoning process, or is it something else that's causing the like their beliefs or whatever?
And for my part, I have never seen but one type of believer that didn't believe based on some fallacy, right? And the type of believer that believes but doesn't believe based on some fallacy is the type of believer that believes on experience.
The argument forms that have been given historically have just been attempted direct demonstrations of that sort of existential proposition about God, right? And so those, I mean, we now know from hindsight, those will all be flawed. Okay. But as Corman points out, that doesn't eliminate, though, logically the possibility of pursuing more roundabout strategies, starting from weaker propositions, and then maybe getting up to the main goal, the main strong proposition of just the stated existence.
Weren't things like cosmological arguments, weren't they already roundabout enough?
Say what?
Weren't the various bread and butter arguments, like the cosmological argument, etc., weren't those roundabout enough already? I don't see how it helps to go any more roundabout.
No, not at all. They didn't start out roundabout. They started out as direct deductions of like a uncaused first cause. If you read either Aristotle's or you read Aquinas's, it's going to be or Leibniz's, they're going to be like in you can write them in premise conclusion form, and it's just it's an attempted direct demonstration of that of the existence of God.
Yeah, usually
it's not roundabout.
Well, usually the cosmological arguments that I've seen, or uncaused cause arguments, I'm not saying that they don't exist, but usually it just proves that the universe had to have had a cause, and then follows by just the slapping of a label on that cause. So to me, that is somewhat, I mean, we could call that uncaused cause whatever you want. We could call it a billion different things,
So, right, if you stopped reading, say, the Summa Theologiae at question 2, right, after Article 3, then, okay, sure, but, like, if you read on from, like, questions 3 up to, like, question 12 or question 11, then what, I mean, even though, like, Aquinas spoils it for you by saying, like, this is just what we call God, the point is that he's going to then argue for all the different, he's going to argue for all the different attributes of this first cause, and that it winds up having all the attributes that theologians say God has. So that's actually going to be the more roundabout part. But my point is just getting the existence of the first cause down. That was like a direct demonstration, and from what we now know, that's going to beg the question.
Okay, so then you're okay. So you're not a fan of these arguments, then?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my main question to you guys is like, what causes the faulty reasoning? Like, is it the fact that we're fallible, or like what is the main cause that causes people to like come to believe things that aren't true or not evidently true?
Combination of ambition and just the limitation also of the state of the art in human reason at the time. Like back in the 13th century, there wasn't yet mathematical logic. They had just sort of the syllogistic logic of Aristotle. And so like the 13th century and also the 14th century, we see innovations as well in different kinds of modal logics and different notions of logical consequence. But then that kind of gets snuffed out by the plague, and interest in logic just dropped. And so all we had by the 1600s, all you have is like the Port Royal logic, just kind of giving a reiteration again of syllogistic logic. So by the 19th century, then there's actual modern mathematics had developed, and some of the techniques from algebra are used to specify by George Boole propositional logic, like with and or not being characterized in Boolean. It's now known as like a Boolean algebraic way. And mathematical logic finally gets going, where now we can begin bringing together syllogistic and propositional logic into one, where now you have like first order, second order logic. And just the expressive resources with mathematical logic is just way off the charts in comparison to the sort of restricted or narrow syllogistic logic that Aristotle was working with, or like the propositional logic that the Stoics were working with. So it really blows up. It really kind of blows up in expressiveness and what the deductive possibilities are. Like the deductive horizons begin to expand. Human reason begins to grow. So like in the 13th century, it's kind of narrow. There's not much you can do. Aquinas, what he was doing was almost state of the art. So, but like fast forward to the 20th century, now 21st century, we would expect the state of the art to do much more than something like, some reiteration of the 5 ways by phasor or something like that. We would expect something more, just way more powerful. And so I haven't seen much of that. The last person actually who did sort of a transcription into mathematical logic of like Thomas Aquinas' arguments, just to check to see if they're valid or whatnot. And I think it was shown that they were valid. It was by Jan Salamuka from Poland. He was a Polish Thomas it was in the 1940s when he published his work about transcribing, using Russell's like simple theory of types, transcribing the cosmological argument from St. Thomas Aquinas, the one from using motion into type theory. It's a pretty interesting article. I took a look at it. It's very nice, but that's as far as the work in theology has done, and as far as its interest in mathematical logic and whatnot. It's just there's like a dearth of it. It's just a chasm, basically gap, just kind of waiting to be filled, if it ever will be. So the combination of ambition, like if we have a belief in abstract objects, we have a belief in universals. you have a belief in God or something like that. These are the sort of things that would require quite a bit of work to be done to demonstrate their like existence, as opposed to like just physical objects that are not currently in your perception. That can be done. Like you can eliminate skepticism about that, but skepticism about like the abstract objects and God, that's just massive. Of course, it's ambitious for someone to want to go on that. Sure, like if they actually successfully did it, there would be serious accolades and immortality and fame forevermore for them. But like on the other hand, it's like, well, good luck.
CP, would you say it's
Hey,
yeah, I was
you know,
gonna ask.
if they were successful, great, you know.
Right,
But
right. I was gonna ask,
yeah,
like,
right.
do you think it's possible for them to succeed, or is it is it like like already like too late for them to succeed, like for them to be able to interpret their logic correctly?
Are we waiting for someone to respond?
Yeah, I was asking you, CP. I was just asking,
Oh,
like,
sorry. You
yeah,
can just
yeah.
call me Sep, not
Oh, Sep.
CEP. It's,
I'm sorry, brother.
yes.
No, I was just asking, like is it possible for them to succeed in figuring out their logic, or is it impossible at this point?
It's not logically impossible.
Okay.
Like, I'm not going to just shut the door on it altogether. Any more than I would shut the door on the resolution to the P versus NP problem. Right? And that's going to be like a really hard feat to accomplish.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what that problem is?
Sure. So you've probably heard about it. That it's from an area of theoretical computer science known as computational complexity theory. P is going to be the class of is going to be a kind of complexity class, and it's a class of algorithms where it's a class of algorithms that, given a deterministic Turing machine, the function of the computation time is going to be in a polynomial form, however complicated that polynomial is. And so NP, on the other hand, is going to be a class of algorithms. How it's characterized, and this is where sort of there's a split with computer scientists about how that's best understood. The N in the P, like some think it's just a definitional fiction, and some think it's a real thing. But the idea is that there's it makes use of a definition known as a kind of Turing machine known as a non-deterministic Turing machine. And the difference between the deterministic Turing machine and the non-deterministic Turing machine is that a deterministic Turing machine, given the same input, okay, it will always deliver the same output, right? And the computation is it's sort of the possibilities or the steps of each computation is just going to be like a path. It's just like a line from one step to the next to the output. Whereas a non-deterministic Turing machine, given the same input, you're not always going to get the same output. So this is just set up by definition. And so the idea is that it's still the function, shape of the function of like of all the possible inputs are still going to be in a polynomial sort of functional form. But in terms of the amount of steps it would take, so like given like if there was like And so the idea is that, the idea with the problem is that the question is, are these two classes identical or not? And because what computer scientists are wondering is that the definition that was brought in for the non-deterministic Turing machine, like that, of course, doesn't actually match up with any sort of physically constructed computer that we have. They're all going to be determinists. They're all going to operate like deterministic Turing machines. And so this is just brought in by definition, brought in as just strictly speaking by definition. And so the question is, are these not just simply the same class of algorithms? If the shape of the input as the input gets larger is going to be of a polynomial function, it shouldn't matter if it's a deterministic Turing machine or non-deterministic Turing machine. So the state of the art in that problem, I think, was last stated, as far as I've been reading the citations in the literature on it, is by an article by the name of by a researcher from Israel by the name of Shai Ben David, and he writes that the difficulty of P versus NP was underestimated by earlier researchers that thought that maybe they could like get a quick a resolution to it. This seems like a logic problem, something like, since this being an identity proposition, it's something like the continuum hypothesis, where the continuum hypothesis is stated as Aleph sub 1 equals 2 to the power of Aleph sub 0, right? And whether or not that identity is true or false, or that there is some kind of, let's say, given the transfinite cardinal Aleph sub 0 and the transfinite cardinal Aleph sub 1, is there a transfinite cardinal that exists that is greater than Aleph sub 0, but less than Aleph sub 1? All right? So, since what's at stake is some identity proposition, and that turned out to be, that particular proposition turned out to be independent from the axioms of like Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory, then it seems that this particular identity proposition between P and NP might have a similar logical fate, and that's been curbed. That's been sort of sidelined, saying, well, no, hold on. It seems that any sort of decision problem, what we've seen, what they've noted, what some computer scientists have noticed or observed, is that most of the decision problems that or algorithms that have been formulated in computational complexity theory could be translated into some problem in number theory. Okay, so if that's so, then there's this phenomenon that if you can express a certain proposition from some field into some number theoretic form, then it cannot be independent from the axioms of set theory. So instead, then you have to ask the weaker question, well, is it going to be independent from the axioms of Peano or arithmetic, for number theory? And the reason why they're asking this question is because there's been evidence that indicates that it could very well be that P equals NP. For instance, the problem of finding a general solution to standard linear programming problems was thought to be an NP, right? But then, George Danzig discovered the simplex method, and then it turns out to be NP. So, so there's sort of evidence indicating that maybe, and other results have indicated that maybe P equals NP. But then other difficulties that have been run into, there's evidence that's piling up that P does not equal NP. Most computer scientists that I've heard about this think that P does not equal NP. Okay. So when there's kind of this indecision or evidence kind of both ways, it's like usually with conjectures like this, evidence is going to swing mostly in one direction. Like evidence mostly supports, say, the Riemann hypothesis being true. It's just a matter of finding a proof for it. So here the evidence is kind of splitting. And so that's kind of why they're wondering there might not be a proof or a disproof one way or the other. So it could just be independent from something. In this case, it couldn't be independent from set theory, since the idea is that, well, it's probably expressible in some number theoretic form. So the weaker notion that Ben David's talking about is that it would be independent from number theory. But then Ben David seems to think that there's evidence that indicates that trying to solve that problem before the original problem would be just as hard as trying to solve the original problem. And that's kind of where things have hung regarding the P versus NP problem since, as far as I've seen so far.
Thank you for taking the time to explain that to us. I'll say for me, it was probably well beyond my level of understanding, but it was very interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain it so well.
Sure. I mean, I tried. Yeah, it's a bit kind of out there.
It's a big bite. It's a big bite for people who are, not as nearly as well versed as you are in some of these matters. And again, it's really appreciated that you took the time to elaborate on it and explain it so well. I'm much appreciated, man.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it's kind of a topic that's kind of interested me. The topic on the existence of God.
I think at some level, regardless of your personal beliefs, I think that the question has some level of interest, probably for just about everyone.
That's been my experience too.
Hey, ICT, I got work in the morning. I'm gonna head out. I'll talk to you later, okay?
Absolutely, Wolf. Thank you for stopping in, man.
No, not a problem at all.
Right.
Later, Frank.
Later, brother.
So, would we agree we may have reached the logical conclusion of the stage?
Well, we still don't know whether gods exist or not, ICT, so
yeah, man.
Well, it definitely couldn't be just resolved like in the middle of a
Hi, got here. How you doing? I exist. There you go. Answer.
Yeah, I don't.
But God 420 isn't your username actually indicating that weed is God?
I like you, Sap. I gotta like you once in a while, Sap. I'm just sitting here listening to the sense and the nonsense mixing among itself and each other, and not decide which way is in or out. And then, well, I was just playing the bass in the background.
Hey, Sep, I was wondering, are you ever interested in doing a stage and just like talking about a specific subject that you're interested in that we might be able to do? Or
oh yeah, sure, I could do that. Why not?
I'm gonna send you a message, and you just let me know whenever you're available, and we'll set that up so we could. And ICT will be here too, right, ICT?
Yeah, I'll be here. I'm always wanting to learn more.
Yep.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, I'll let you know.
All right, thank you, bro. Let me send you that message.
Thank you, Sep, again, man. Much appreciated, man. I love listening to you talk about subjects that you appear to be passionate about, because you go into a lot of detail and your explanations are very clear and It's much appreciated, man.
I do try to cite my sources. Yes.
Yeah, you're very. You stand out to be very well read and very well versed in a lot of the subject matter. It's interesting to listen to you speak.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I do enjoy sharing.
So, if Frank, do you mind if I end the room now, or would you want to take it over, or do you think we've reached a point where we could probably go ahead and end it?
Yeah, end it. That's fine. No worries.
All right. So
let's all dump down into general VC.
Good.
Yeah.